This is Real Sports Talk, Rumack and the Greek, featuring Billy the Greek and Stormin Norman Rumack, brought to you by the good people at Cosa and Carpets for Life.
Hey everybody, I am Stormin Norman Rumack. Glad to be with you. My regular broadcast partner, the one and only the Greek, Billy George Sakis. He's a little bit under the weather, and I know he's watching. And Billy, hope you're back in the chair on the other side of the screen. Going at me and yelling and screaming and interrupting me. I mean, it's part of the show, right? But anyway, in all seriousness, hope you're back and feeling well soon, pal. So take it easy. And Billy, hope you enjoy the show. Of course, you'd much rather be here, but one of your favorite guests in line has joined us to fill in, and he's not a Bill, and he knows his stuff, as you know. He's not some just ordinary guy. This man knows his stuff on every sport. Alex Campbell, well-versed on the NFL, NBA, anything else you want to talk about. Michigan native, Red Wings fan, but, you can talk about the Red Wings as well. So, Alex, thanks for joining us and helping us out in Billy's absence.
Great to be here.
Great to have you on, and thank you, sir, and great, of course, of our sponsors, Cosa, the Standardbred Horse Racing Association of Ontario, been longtime supporters of myself when I was on the Fan 590, and now with Billy, and, of course, very loyal to us. And, just can't say that often enough. It's a great experience. If you want to take your family, have a special occasion out to any of your favorite racetracks, wherever you live. And certainly in terms of Ontario, whether it's Woodbine, Mohawk, whatever you like, you'll have a great time, great dining. I know that firsthand. Dining is as good as any five-star restaurant. It's not an exaggeration. And, of course, Nicky, the King of Carpets, another loyal sponsor. Great guy, real nice guy. Montreal Canadiens fan. So some of you Leaf fans may not like that, but they did beat the Leafs last time out, So in any case, and our great producer, Jordan LaRoche, who keeps us on the air and keeps things running smoothly. We're with you for the hour. Lots to talk about. Yes, of course, the NFL playoffs and much more, some NBA, some NHL. So, Alex, great to have you back. Thanks for joining us. And my goodness, there's so many angles we can explore in terms of the conference championships that happened on Sunday. So let me start with Pat Mahomes and the ankle that was supposedly was so badly damaged. Well, it must have been, because Mahomes talked openly about, I guess he was in the bucket of ice every day for several hours, and, to help bring down the swelling and bring back the circulation.
Yeah.
And, it was interesting. I was watching, the NFL pregame show with Rex Ryan, and all due respect, pretty fine coach. He's had a nice career, but he was saying he was absolutely certain that the way Cincinnati was going to line up against him, that they were going to watch him closely. First of all, was he favoring the angle? And secondly, to within the rules of the game, punish him in terms of taking advantage of any reluctance to move to the side of his damaged ankle, which I think was the right. And so Rex Ryan was sure with the linemen, the linebackers, and having a spy in case Mahomes wanted to take off, that might do in Pat Mahomes. And at the end of the game, Mahomes, him and his teammates, they were kind of, we weren't quite done in. And we saw that beautiful run when the game was on the line Mahomes made. Yeah. And it's just unbelievable. The whole thing about Mahomes and the way he was able to play, did that surprise you at all, Alex?
Not at all. I think you could rewind the tape to like the first time I was on your show. I think I talked about Mahomes a little bit. To me, like, this is a guy where I just believed the hype the whole time. To me, he's as talented as he is a gamer, and I think that's the rare stuff that makes for multi-time champions, when you got an athlete who's premier talent and also a gamer like that, who can pull through in the moment. Look, it's not like he wasn't in pain, especially in the fourth quarter. You see moments where, I think I remember after that big touchdown pass he had to MVS in the second half, he kind of hobbles off the field and trots real lightly on that ankle in celebration. You know what I mean? And you could tell he was favoriting it. I'm not surprised at all that he was able to pull through and play the way he did, especially in the second half, make that key drive, make that last run, hit Kelsey on that massive third down in the fourth quarter to keep the drive moving. I thought that was just quintessential Mahomes. And I think that, like him or hate him, you're destined to see him time and again in the situation, in the championship games and in the Super Bowls.
All right. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. Was Cincinnati set back, if I'm right? Were they missing three offensive, or at least veteran offensive linemen?
Yeah, Yep, they were out 3 total offensive linemen, and of course, that's really been Cincinnati's struggle, since getting Burrow is getting proper protection around him. They scrambled in free agency and tried to sign veterans, and that's what happens when you sign veterans in free agency is that occasionally these guys have a little more tread that's been taken off those tires, and they'll break down a little easier, and you hit these stretches at the end of the year, and then you gotta piece together an offensive line, and in a situation where you've got one of the most, even when they were healthy, one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. As it is. And so when they're not healthy, it's a real problem. And the Chiefs are no defense to slouch at. I mean, they're very, very talented on defense. They can get after the passer. They've got some good veteran pass rushers. And I mean, they can really get after the passer. So yeah. I think it absolutely made an impact on the game, and it really, you got to wonder how long-term that's going to impact Joe Burrow's career. I know that's been a question time and again, even this early in his career, is like, you've got this massive talent. You go out and spend this other first-round pick on a wide receiver, and of course that combination has been great, but how long does that last if he keeps getting hit?
Well, and would you, I mean, I guess we would expect first thing Cincinnati will look at in terms of free agency and the draft is, yeah, that's a big hole, and you want to keep your quarterback safe. You want to keep them happy. Do you expect they're going to do all they can to shore that up? And can they shore it up in one draft, one free agency period?
I would assume so. And you know what I mean? I think they'll probably be able to sign another veteran. I think they'll have at least 2 of the ones they signed coming back that are injured. And then on top of it, they can look to spend a higher pick, a first, maybe a second round, maybe even a third round. Sometimes these offensive line gems you can get in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round too, especially at the guard position. I think you can get them real deep. The tackles, especially left tackles, tend to go a little quicker, but they're pretty good at left tackle right now. That really both tackle spots. What they need is interior help. They need somebody who can really lock down the middle of that offensive line for a 6 to 8 year period and get through the stretch, like the real window, the meat of Joe Burrow's career.
All right, we'll go over to the other conference. So, San Francisco, Philadelphia. So let me ask you this. Billy and I had some long talks when the Cowboys were stumbling a bit and the Dak hurt. And then, the Eagles were off to a fast start, and people were talking about Jalen Hurts. I think people were kind of like, I don't know. Let's see how this guy does when he has a tougher schedule, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But so, and then at the end of the game, when the Eagles prevail, people are saying, okay, but look at, the Niners didn't have any quarterbacks. Like, they're down to their 4th string quarterback after Purdy goes down, right? Yeah. And so people were wondering, and, there was analysis that you could look at and say, okay, well, even if Purdy was in there, the Eagles defense was just smothering and punishing, just obliterating, within the rules of the game. So even if Purdy was in there, probably they wouldn't have survived with a kind of nonstop punishing defense.
Yeah.
Do you go along with that?
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, look, there's a reason that he was only in there for one drive to start, and then the backup gets a concussion, right? I mean, in order for that to be the case, that defense is hitting hard. I mean, and they were smothering the 49ers. I was really impressed with how they were able to bottle up Christian McCaffrey. I mean, granted, you had to know when the 4th stringer came in, that was going to be the plan, is just to feed it to him over and over again. But, they did. He's still hard to stop. I mean, Carolina did that with some success for a while. So, you can definitely do it. I was really impressed with the way they were able to bottle up McCaffrey and just force Purdy to beat him with their arm. And when they had him in those behind the stick situations, they really got after him. And, the same thing with Johnson. And then to see Purdy come back in, it's been crazy how they've been able to pull through this stretch of multiple quarterback injuries. But at the same time, yeah, you're up against it. Now, I mean, I'll say this about the Eagles. I follow in line, with Hurts has been that talented the whole time. This is a guy, you go back to college and how he was doubted in college, how he lost the job at Alabama to Tua. Then he transfers to Oklahoma and gets to and wins the bowl game himself. You know what I mean? And then gets to the NFL and we're not sure of him. The Eagles weren't sure he's going to be the starter. He proves himself time and time again. They're doubted again here. And I'll tell you what, this is going to be a great Super Bowl. The Eagles match up really, really well with the Chiefs. This is going to be a fantastic matchup. I haven't really even looked at where Vegas has a line right now, but it's got to be pretty close.
Yeah, well, 2 punishing defenses. So that's like a throwback NFL championship.
That's right.
Depending on how old you are. But so let's go back to the point you were just elaborating on in terms of Jalen. So people with way more expertise than myself on the NFL, they were skeptical about the Eagles. beginning of the year. And, you know, I was like, no, Jalen Hurts, like, okay, yeah, he comes from a great football school. He comes from Alabama, but it's like, okay, outside of, you know, the respect you have for Jalen and what he did at Alabama and then transferring to Oklahoma, uh, were you hearing a lot of kind of like, the Eagles, okay, nice start, interesting quarterback, but is there any way, even with a pretty good or an excellent defense, most people who were objective, so to speak, thought this was possible for the Eagles with Jalen Hurts in the pivot spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think some did, but you know, by and large, even at like the big media outlets and the so to speak football experts, you know, they were really heavily doubted. Even as they got to, you know, 9-1, 10-1, 11-1, they were still heavily doubted the whole time. You know, and they played. Honestly, they did play a bit of a weak schedule. I want to say that like 5 of their first 6 opponents ended up with under 500 records, but nonetheless, you can only really play who's in front of you and on your schedule at the end of the day. And of course, they have to play everybody in the NFC East twice. Dallas came on with a strong surge at the end of the year. Washington is not a great team, but they're very talented on defense. They got 4 first-round picks on the defensive line. And that's a tough team to play against, and they could really beat anyone for that reason. You know, and so that division isn't easy. And it wasn't easy this year. The Giants, of course, were resurgent. I mean, that was not an easy division this year. And they were cream of the crop. I mean, cream of the crop in the NFC. You know, only really the Niners came close to them there at the end. The Niners made a great surge after getting McCaffrey and, of course, after Purdy's run too. But, you know, the Niners were the only one really close to them. And in the end, like you said, even with Purdy, and I know it was only really one drive where we saw him healthy, but, you know, the Eagles looked like they had the upper hand the entire game.
Yeah. So just going back to Jalen before we move along from,
Yeah.
So what was it, let's say, that you saw about Jalen Hurts that all these experts, analysts, well, no, I'm not disrespecting them, but it's like, because that happens all the time in sports, right? You think you're going to read and you don't. But what were they not seeing in Jalen that you saw?
I think like we've seen a lot of these guys come out of college that have these really strong arms, but they're actually run first quarterbacks. And I think Jalen got labeled as like a undersized, decent arm, run first quarterback. That's not the case. He's an absolute. He's a pocket passer that can scramble. He's a little bit quicker. Honestly, you know, the guy that I've seen that I would compare him to the most when I, you know, kind of look back in history would be kind of like a Steve Young with a little more athleticism, where, you know, he's not got the strongest arm in the NFL, but he's got great arm talent, makes all the throws. He can make the wacky sidearm throws look good. He can hit outside the numbers, you know, 40, 50 yards down the field. He can throw on the run, and he can get out of the pocket and he can move. Now he's faster than Young was, but he's crafty in much the same way. To when the pocket breaks down, he can find the gap and find the hole and get through it. And I got to tell you, that's a skill that a lot of guys don't have that.
Okay. Alex Campbell, our great guest, knowledgeable in all sports as we continue looking at the conference championships ahead to the Super Bowl. So, all right. So we've dealt with Jalen Hurts. In terms of the Eagles defense, I'm assuming, you know, in terms of the personnel going into the season, and, you know, the Cowboys were the talk of the town, a reasonable expectation, you know, based on their skill that maybe this year they've got enough. But why, in terms of the doubters of the Eagles, you know, as they say, offense sells tickets. It's a bit of an exaggeration. Defense wins championships, but it's not, you know, it's not totally out of the water, because defense does help significantly win championships. So why weren't people factoring in at least the Eagles defense in terms of respecting them?
I think that they saw the Eagles as a you know, kind of long in the tooth older defense that eventually was going to break down, even though they had success early in the year. You know, you got guys like Fletcher Cox and Darius Slay having, you know, especially Slay having a great year. But I think that like what got forgotten is, you know, guys like Hassan Reddick, who's in the prime of his career. You know, Devin Allen, Reed Blankenship. These guys can really play. Nakobe Dean, when he was at Georgia, I mean, he looked like the best sideline to sideline linebacker since Brian Urlacher. I mean, like, this guy can fly at the linebacker spot. He can cover like a safety, and he can hit like a linebacker. So I mean, they've got great young talent, and I think they had just enough, you know, kind of insurgency youth, especially with Dean and a couple other rookies, to kind of stay fresh. You know, pump some fresh blood in there, and the veterans really stepped up. You had Cox, who was healthy most of the year. Slay stayed healthy all year. And Slay, in my opinion, Darius Slay had the best season he's had in the last, I don't know, 6-7 seasons.
Okay, as we continue with Alex Campbell is filling in. He's of course a great guest, but today Billy George Sakis a little bit under the weather, so
Big shoes to fill.
Well, yeah, but you do a fine job, and you know your stuff. So I know Billy strongly said, hey, if you want someone to join you, I want to get Alex, and I said, yeah, amen to that, anytime. So give Billy credit for that. He loves your work too.
I will.
Okay, so we've got two quarterbacks. One who has been talked about for a long time. He's got the respect. The other one, as you were just talking about, and Hurts, who was under the radar is a nice way of putting it, or not respected, or the same way, obviously. And kind of like last year, a lot of people doubted the Rams, and I guess Stafford as quarterback, because of his time in Detroit, whatever they thought of that. And then he and his team, to be fair, with a great defense too, end up winning the Super Bowl. So both teams, both Kansas City and Philly, have heavyweight boxer championship type toughness. It's going to be, they talk about the battle in the trenches, but does Kansas City have to be as good as they are, as tough as they are, on both sides of the ball, and certainly on defense? Do they have to be a little bit weary? They know what they're getting, the Eagles defense, but I wouldn't say I'm not saying they would take Jalen Hurts lightly, but is there maybe an inclination? Well, okay, but at least it's not Tom Brady. I'm just saying something. He's not like, he didn't come into the season as a heavyweight, but do they look at him as a heavyweight now?
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of them taking Hurts lightly necessarily. I think if the Eagles have an advantage here, it's that Mahomes has really had to really pull the cart this year in a way that he hasn't before. I think that ultimately, if the Chiefs end up stumbling in this game and losing the game, I think you can look at that. You look at his receiving core that's certainly changed, and look, these guys, they're not quite as tight on the routes, that their hands aren't quite as good, they're not quite as fast. You know what I mean? Like, they're just, it's not the same receiving core he had. It's just not. I mean, he's got good receivers, and Kelsey's got one of the best tight ends in the league, but this is not the same receiving core he had. This is not the same offensive line he had. They've got some band-aids on the offensive line. They drafted pretty well. I really like that kid Trey Smith they have. He's great on the offensive line, but and of course I like Pacheco a lot, the young running back. And of course CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU, man, he's still that power back for them. That offense can still move the ball, but it's really even more dependent on Mahomes now than it ever has been. And like I said, he's really had to pull the cart. And I think you see that, with the ankle injury, you see him play hurt, and that's the only way they win that game. And they barely won that game. And I think if they have an undoing, it's an underestimation of anything of the Eagles defense, and not an underestimation of Jalen Hurts. Because the Eagles defense, I think, is statistically a top 10 unit, but eyeball test a top 5 unit. It's just one of those. And I think, but that being said, I always side with the more talented quarterback in the matchup. And if I had as a betting man, I'm going to go, if it's a toss-up game, I'm going to go with Mahomes and the Chiefs. But I think if anything, that's their undoing is underestimating that Eagles defense, not them underestimating the Eagles offense.
Okay, so I talked about Rex Ryan pregame show. He was thinking, Cincinnati would take advantage of Mahomes. Yeah. They thought wobbly ankle. Potentially it should have been, but it wasn't, or not wobbly enough to stop him from doing what he does. Yeah. So, but the Eagles, with a much tougher defense, one of the best, if not the best, in the league, and right up there with Kansas City. So are the Eagles going to be doing what Rex Ryan was talking about? They'll send guys onto his weak side ankle, and they'll have a spy watching Mahomes, in terms of taking off or whatever side, whichever kind of movements he's favoring. Can the Eagles do successfully what Rex Ryan was talking about, what he thought Cincinnati could or would do?
Yeah, I think they can. I think they can scheme that way. But I think ultimately Mahomes is going to be able to bust that. He's great on his feet. He's great on the move, but that His scrambling isn't required to beat you. They can do what they did kind of at the end of that game, and they can line up with two tight ends, Kelsey and Noah Gray. They're both great receiving and blocking tight ends, and they can play old fashioned I-form pro style football against you with the best of them. So they really don't need to set up in the spread. What they typically run is more of like a West Coast spread offense with Mahomes. It's very much in the vein of like a mix between Bill Walsh and modern college football. It's like a hybrid between the two. And so you do see him get out of the pocket a lot, but it's not something that's 100% necessary. And of course you have the long layover between the championship games and the extra 2 weeks. And we saw what they were able to do and how, I mean, they were saying he could barely move before and was able to play in that game in a week's time. That's remarkable. Something that like never will cease to amaze me is how quick athletes can get over these injuries. My wife actually had a high ankle sprain not too long ago. It's these icy New England winters. We had ice on the porch, and she stumbled, and she actually had a high ankle sprain and broke a bone in the top of her foot. And anyways, her recovery on the ankle sprain was longer than the broken bone in her foot, and she was off her feet and on crutches for the better part of 6-8 weeks, but you got an athlete in here, and of course the medical staff's a little bit different. You know what I mean? The trainers are different, and you probably got some extra drugs in there that she doesn't have access to, but nonetheless, he's ready in a week. So how good is he going to look in a couple more weeks? How effective is that game plan even going to be? Is he really going to be as hobbled as he was? I tell you what, for at least 3 quarters, he looked pretty good over the weekend.
Sure. Alex Campbell is our great guest analyzing the National Football League. We'll get into some of the other sports later, including the NBA, but maybe on the NHL. So obviously in terms of recent experience, Kansas City has, and especially Mahomes, has quite an advantage there over the Eagles, or at least Jalen Hurts. But when it comes down to one game, winner takes all, we know from every sport we've ever seen, it's not always the best team, more experienced team that wins. Sometimes it is, but I'll defer to you. How much of an advantage, at least theoretically, going into the game does Kansas City have with, in the Mahomes era, their postseason experience?
I think they have the advantage on paper, but I do think that advantage on paper comes with a level of expectations that actually is a disadvantage in the locker room. The Eagles, even though they've had a great season, they have the best record in the NFL, they're going to come in the underdog, most likely. And they're going to have the mentality of nobody expected us to be here. Nobody talked about us all season. Nobody gave our guy Hurts due. Nobody gave this defense due. And we're going to show them what's up. Even after we beat the 49ers, it was nonstop excuses about how we played a 4th string quarterback and blah, 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 blah. And now here we are in the Super Bowl. So they're going to have, they're going to have that mentality. And they're going to come into that game. If anything, I think they have the advantage on that front. But like I said, I always take the better quarterback in these matchups. And it doesn't always ring true. Look, I mean, Brady lost to Eli Manning twice. So, it happens. But to me, like, that's the other thing about this playoffs too. They've been great. We haven't had that wild card team that has come from nowhere and been a buzzsaw and cut through one of the conferences. I tell you what, if we had that team, my money would be on that team, but that team isn't here right now.
Okay. Is there any advantage either way in terms of the head coaches? Obviously, Mr. Reed's been to he knows all about the Super, but I'm just saying that may or may not be a factor. What do you think?
Well, I do think that's a factor. Reed has, decades on Sirianni. I mean, decades. And of course, that's gonna factor in big time when it comes to just the little adjustments in the game. One of my favorite quotes in sports is from John Wooden years ago. They had this reporter that asked John Wooden, of course, the great UCLA basketball head coach.
Sure.
And they asked him. They said, and a lot of people probably already know this. This reporter asked him, so you do in practice, you practice the little things so much, John. Like, why do you focus so much on the little things? He says, listen, we're all here playing basketball. The only difference is the little things. And that's
yeah, they can shoot better than the rest of us who just watch the game on TV.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the only difference is the little things. We're all here to play basketball. We're all about the same talent level, but the only difference is the little things. And that's how those veteran coaches are. Is they're so good at the finite details. That's what they always talk about with Bill Belichick. Man, just on the details. Nick Saban, man, just on the details. They're just so good with the finite details. And Andy Reid's one of those guys. He's gonna be on top of it. He's seen everything Nick Sirianni's seen a million times over. So that is a big disadvantage for Sirianni and the Eagles, but it's not something that's never been overcome before. I tell you, if you ask me to pick a favorite in the game, it's absolutely the Chiefs. I don't know what the number is, but if the Chiefs get, let's say, if it's anything like Chiefs -3, I'm on the Chiefs.
Okay. So speaking of that, if you're on, the Andy Reid side, facing like a monster of a defense in Philadelphia, when Mahomes and Andy Reid, get together and they have their meetings. Okay, so what, if any, vulnerabilities in a great defense do the Eagles have that Mahomes can try and take advantage of, if there is anything in particular?
I think the Eagles can be beat with the old dink and dunk. I think they're so quick to get after the passer. They've got a lot of exotic blitz schemes. And like, if you sit in the pocket and you try to play like that Bruce Arians risk it for the biscuit football, that's where they get you. That's where they're going to get after the quarterback. They're going to rack up 3, 4, 5, 6 sacks in a game. What you've got to do is make quick throws out of the pocket. You got one Hall of Fame tight end and another young tight end with great hands, and Noah Gray, and a couple of receivers too, like Smith-Schuster and MVS, that are quick in the case of MVS and great hands in the case of Schuster. And so you've got these good targets. MVS is also a tall target. And so you've got these good targets for this dink and dunk game. Pacheco is a great receiver out of the backfield as well. And so is CEH. So you got two running backs that are good receivers out of the backfield too. So I think that they can run kind of that, and that harkens back to that West Coast scheme too. I mean, you can picture kind of like the old Bill Walsh days of, we're gonna stretch the field in these zone runs, and we're also gonna check down. You load the box, we play action pass and hit you deep. You know what I mean? I think that's the way that the Chiefs can scheme and beat them, is with the old dink and dunk game. I don't expect them to try to stretch the field a lot.
Okay. Alex Campbell is our guest, filling in for Billy Georgitsakis. All right, my good buddy is a little bit under the weather today. So, Billy, hope you're feeling better real soon. We'll see you next week.
Get well soon, Billy.
Yeah, Billy, you and I need those steel cage matches, verbally.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go after you like Billy does. I can't. I don't even know for sure I can.
Oh, you could. You'd have no problem. But no, that's what Billy and I enjoy. We make it like a WWE event, but we're doing it with our yapping. But it's fun. But anyway.
I love it. I just sit back here and watch most of the time. It's great.
All right. Alex Campbell, our great guest. So, Alex, let me ask you about Kelsey. I mean, I've lost track already how many years he's been in the NFL. I'll call him, this is a comment. He's an NFL lifer. But, boy, I mean, you can pick probably several guys you'd say unstoppable. But first of all, he's got speed, he's got hands, and he's built, I'll use the nice term for it, he's built like a brick outhouse. Yeah. It's like running into him is like trying to stop an 18-wheeler. Am I probably not too much of an exaggeration?
Not at all. I mean, look at his brother is a center, a Hall of Fame center. I mean, like his brother's an offensive lineman. This guy's huge. Travis Kelce is amazing. I think he's been in the league something like 12, 13 years. Like, he's been around a long time. I think he's like 33 and Jason Kelsey's like 35, I believe. I can look it up, but either way, like, you're looking at two football brothers who, they have a lot in common. I mean, Kelsey's a hell of a blocker too. He's, you know what I mean? This guy just does everything. This is like optimal. Like, if George Kittle ends up achieving like his peak ceiling, he'll basically be Travis Kelce. I mean, you know what I mean? They're very similar. Yeah. Great blockers, real strong at the line, tremendous route runners, great hands, and much more athletic than you think they are when they line up.
Kelce almost strikes me as the sort of guy, if the Chiefs ever ran into like one of those unbelievable waves of injuries, that, if Andy Reid asked him, look, can you, I know it's not your position, yeah, but you're big, tough, and strong. Can you fill in at middle linebacker today? I'll bet you he could probably do more than a decent job.
Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure he could fill in at middle linebacker. I'm even more sure he could fill in on the offensive line. I really am, and I'd say the same thing for Kittle. Like if you're honestly on your third, fourth center, and you just need a dude, like you either Kelsey or Kittle, you honestly could throw on the offensive line. They'd be a little undersized, but these guys, I mean, they are tossing. When you look at when they get bumped off the line, both of them, and passes, they're just on another level because they'll take a linebacker and they'll just throw him to the side. I mean, just throw him to the side, and there's nothing quite like it in the NFL right now. There's nobody quite like those two that's able to block as well as they are, and still has the hands and the athleticism, and is able to just toss linebackers when they try to bump and run. It's crazy. Two very, very strong tight ends.
Yeah, not a direct comparison, but I was a kid when Jim Brown was playing, and used to hear and see that guys were actually afraid to hit him because they would get hurt hitting him.
Yeah,
and I'm not comparing Kelsey to Jim Brown. I wouldn't compare anybody. I'm just saying in terms of Kelsey, it's probably like not the great day for the linebackers and the cornerbacks and safeties. If you're one-on-one, you have to try and take Kelsey down. It is kind of like you probably got more bruises than Kelsey does.
Yeah, absolutely. You remember, I'm going to forget his name now, the old fullback for the Buccaneers. Oh, geez, what is his name? Either way. Well, and really Peyton Hillis, too. You're talking about guys, when they get running downhill, even Jerome Bettis, guys, when they get running downhill, like there is no stopping them. And you don't want to get in front of them. Christian Okoye, these guys, you do not want to get in front of them and take them down. They will run you over. But really, I mean, how many tight ends have been like that? You go back 10, 13 years and that's when you really saw the wave of kind of these basketball player type tight ends. They'll find a soft spot in the zone and they'll make a great catch, had great hands, Antonio Gates types. But Gates was great, and he was a decent blocker, but he wasn't He-Man out there. I mean, it wasn't like that. You know what I mean? Gonzalez, a great tight end. He wasn't half offensive lineman, half tight end. I mean, it wasn't like that.
Okay. So, Alex, let me ask you this. So we look ahead to the Super Bowl, and then we've kind of dissected the two squads.
Yeah.
If there's factors that we ordinarily wouldn't look at that you think might be like X factors, for lack of a better term, or guys in positions that might go a little bit under the radar, who are those players on either both teams that could be the game changers that aren't necessarily spotlight players, but guys that the coaches love?
For the Chiefs, I'm going to go with Isaiah Pacheco, the running back, rookie running back out of Rutgers. Just a real strong runner with the football, has great hands out of the backfield, really, really quick, explosive player. I think he's going to be a great asset for that team for a long time. And I think that he's a guy that he's going to be able to exploit that like I said, with that dink and dunk game, kind of that long handoff where they're throwing in the flats to the running back, that kind of stuff, the screen passes. I think he's going to be able to exploit the Eagles in that way, and I think he's kind of the X factor for them on offense beyond Mahomes. And then I would say for the Eagles, it's more on defense, and it's on Nakobe Dean. I am in love with his athleticism at the linebacker spot. He's got the size and the hip power to be a premier linebacker, but he's got unreal sideline to sideline speed. And he's great in coverage against the tight ends. It's really you watch Nakobe Dean against Kelsey in this game, and where a safety doesn't cover Kelsey and it's on linebacker duty. I'm positive it's probably going to be good Dean for the most part, because his cover skills are just that good. And he's somebody that a lot of people still aren't talking about, even after how great he was at Georgia and how great he's been in the NFL so far.
Okay. One last question before we go to our break. And get some loving for our sponsors. So if Kansas City, well, you got to love the sponsor. We got great sponsors. Absolutely. All right. So if Kansas City and Mahomes win the Super Bowl, however it's won, is Mahomes, from your perspective, if a lot of people think, yeah, right now, going to the playoffs, maybe people thought, okay, flip a coin, him and Josh Allen. But if Kansas City, however they win the Super Bowl, is Mahomes by a wide margin, the front runner as best current quarterback in the National Football League?
Yes. I think unequivocally, yes. Allen looked like this was going to be it. This was going to be the MVP year, and they started out of the gate pretty fast. But then he didn't fully stumble, but he just kind of kind of stalled a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it
See
didn't
some
have,
mistakes here and there, some picks and some,
yeah,
throws. That off.
especially down the stretch. And you kind of saw this exit from the playoffs coming. If you paid attention to the last 6 or 7 of their games down the stretch, it really started. They had a Thursday night game late against New England, where I really and I actually went to that game right here in Foxborough, right down the road. It's the only game I went to this year. And you really in that game kind of saw kind of the wheels start to come off a little bit. You know what I mean? They just Belichick and the Patriots have a real underrated defense. They were able to rattle him, get after him. And he made some real errant throws, threw a couple picks. They got through the game because the Patriots offense is just putrid and could not move the ball against the Bills. But nonetheless, he struggled in that game. And really after that, they had 6 or 7 games to finish the season after that. And those 6 or 7 games, it was just, he played well enough to win the game, and that's great, but it just wasn't that MVP level. I honestly think that Joe Burrow versus Pat Mahomes matchup is the rival we're really going to see through the years, as long as he can stay healthy. If they can get an offensive line around him, especially if they can re-sign Chase and him at the same time and keep them together. I think that's going to be the rivalry with Mahomes. That's gonna be the guy to compete. But right now, Mahomes is on a different level. Combine that with what he can do in the eyeball test on the field. Nobody really looks quite like him when they play the game. They just don't.
Okay, I'm going to throw in one bonus question before we go to the break. So, because we get a lot of Bills fans, actually, they have quite a few season ticket holders in Southern Ontario. So
Sure.
Let me ask you, in terms of just going on, extrapolating on Josh Allen. So it was interesting, the post-game, post-season conference, coach was saying, well, he's saying the Bills have to look at things we can do better or do differently. But he did specify, and that includes Josh Allen. So I'll defer to you here. If the coach is willing to go public with that, I don't think it's unfair. It's like that's the kind of coach he is. And it's like probably some of the fans, or a lot of fans, are asking the same question and the points that you made. But what specifically is he highlighting when he's mentioning Josh Allen by name, the things that as coach he thinks Josh has to work on and get better at if they're going to go to that next level or the ultimate level? What is he referring to? Because he didn't get specific, he just said in general.
Yeah, I think that he's got a lot of the physical stuff down. I think he's really matured as a passer of the ball. His pocket presence is a lot better. I think what trips him up is when he gets against these elite defenses and they have these exotic blitz schemes and coverages that kind of, they'll start with 2 high safeties and then roll one down that look like cover 2 for a minute and then turn into cover 3, or you know what I mean? Things like that. I think they still get him a little bit. I think that's where, if you really check the tape, I think those are the teams he struggles against when you have a premier defensive coordinator with a little talent on that side of the ball that is able to orchestrate a game plan to kind of confuse coverage and use some, like I said, exotic blitz schemes against him to have some creative pressure and get there in different ways. I think that can rattle him a little bit. And I think he still struggles with that key piece of being able to diagnose the defense. Both, this is a lot of these guys talk about. You hear Peyton Manning talk about it on his broadcast with Eli. It's you're not reading the defense once. You're reading the defense twice. You're reading it pre-snap and post-snap. And I don't know exactly where it is, but it looks to me like somewhere in that mix, that pre and post-snap, there can be a little confusion, and he gets a little off the page with the receivers, and it sometimes makes the wrong read. And I think that's where we saw some of those picks come from. Mixed with the pressure, I think that's where we saw some of those picks come from down the stretch. And look, when you're that guy, you're gonna have that target on your back. They're going to game plan specifically against you, and and you better believe if there's a recipe for to beat you, then all of a sudden every team's going to try to do it against you.
All right. So, and just before I wrap this up, is that stuff that Josh Allen, with all of his skills, is that a matter of experience and just seeing it and just watching game film again and again and again until you got it mesmerized, or is it more to it than that?
You hope so. It's one of those where you hope so. You hope that his athletic ability hasn't carried him to this point, and that his mental acuity can't get to that point. You know what I mean? You hope that's not the case. You hope that his athletic ability has carried him to this point, and he can get to that point with the mental acuity. But you don't really know. Look, he's been in the league. What is this? 5-6 years now. He's been in the league for a while. He's not a second or third year player. And you've surrounded him with talent. And the defense is a premier defense on the other side of the ball as well. So, look, you don't know, and in the next couple years is going to be when you find out.
Okay, we'll take a short break. Alex Campbell, our great guest, analyzing the NFL, talk some NBA, maybe a little NHL as well.
Hey.
And we just ahead, we're going to have the COSA Classic for our great sponsors, the Ontario Standardbred Horse Racing Association, and our great friend, the King of Carpets, Nikki. Back with more, and here till the top of the clock. Alex Campbell, Stormin and Rumack, and we're back shortly. Thanks for joining us, and stick around, folks. We'll be right back with you.
By now, you know the name COSA TV, an industry leader producing unique, high-quality digital content promoting harness racing in Ontario. Features, virtual programming, live events, and more. COSA TV has it covered. Follow our social media channels and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page to view the latest content. And if you're looking to bet your favorite Ontario track, check out hpibet.com. COSA TV, taking Ontario racing global.
Welcome to Carpets for Life. For over 30 years, we have been servicing both residential and commercial clients in the sales and installation of custom stair runners on wall-to-wall areas. Our team prides itself in honesty with a regard of professionalism and customer satisfaction. Our many testimonials and continuous referrals is a testament of the quality of workmanship we provide. We strive to ensure a happy customer is a Carpets for Life customer.
Well, there we go. Two great sponsors. We love them. They're very loyal to Billy, George Atsakis, and I. So thanks to COSA, Ontario Standardbred Horse Racing Association. Great entertainment, great dining. It's got everything you want for a night out with your friends or your family, whatever the occasion. They'll make it a special occasion for you, your favorite track. And, of course, Nikki, the King of Carpets, Habs fan. Yeah, they're doing a nice job rebuilding, but, you know, it doesn't happen overnight. So, but anyway, Nikki's a sweetheart of a guy you could have a beer with, have a nice chat, always smiling. So we've got two great sponsors. We're very grateful to the good Lord for them. And as we continue, our producer, Jordan LaRoche, always doing a great job, and Alex Campbell, our great guest, filling in for Billy, who's under the weather, and we're hoping Billy will be back next week and feeling a whole lot better. So, Alex, let's move over to the NBA. You know, So I was watching watched Denver a few times, and obviously, it'll be fascinating in terms of the MVP. I guess it'll go down third year in a row between Embiid and Jokic, and we'll see how that works out. But because I finished work at 11 o'clock at night Eastern, so I come home and sometimes I'm catching the second half of a Golden State game, and I don't get to watch them all the time, but how many times I've seen Golden State at home or on the road, and they're down. Let's say they're in a lousy game or lousy couple of quarters, whatever the case may be, and they're down by 15 or 20 with 10 minutes or 8 minutes or 7 minutes. And good Lord, they still manage they can claw their way back in no time at all. They still got that championship DNA. And it's like, I quoted, this with Billy, over the 2 years now, maybe with you as well. The old line is a great one from the late, God bless him, Rudy Tomjanovich, never doubt the heart of a champion. And it's like, so like a fantasy league question. Let's say somehow playoffs work out. Denver gets to meet Golden State, okay, at some point, whatever round.
Yeah.
Does it make Jokic and the Nuggets and Coach Malone a little bit or a lot nervous because they've still got those guys who've been through everything there is to be through, regular season, postseason, injuries, big deficits, calls from officials that went against. Would it still, for lack of a better term, scare Denver if they're meeting up with Golden State?
Yeah. Look, this is the team that slayed the dragon and beat LeBron James multiple times, with and without Kevin Durant. This is the team. Look, Steph Curry. Has anybody changed the game of basketball like Steph Curry ever, other than maybe Dr. James Naismith? Other than him, probably not. Not one guy, probably not. Look, to me, they do have the DNA to get it done. In a 7-game series, though, I think it's a little scared now. Here's what the Warriors used to have. They used to have a premier defender in the paint that was able to get out at the perimeter and Draymond Green, and now they have a pretty good defender in Draymond Green in the paint and the perimeter. Kevon Looney used to be a premier defender in the paint, and now he's a pretty good defender in the paint. I think that the two Splash Brothers, Curry's been great, but Thompson used to be the second best 3-point shooter in the league, and now pick the day. Sometimes he is, sometimes he's not. For the most part, he's not. So I think that a little bit of the shine's come off, obviously. But you reference Rudy Tomjanovich, I'll reference Toby Keith. Look, I ain't as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how the Warriors get you sometimes. Like, not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once. You give me a 5-minute snapshot, and they can still go on that run. They can still go on that 15-3 run to close out a game. But in a 7-game series, I think the nod has to go. Look, I just don't think anybody else in the West can compete with Jokic. Jokic has hit his prime, his absolute prime. And I just don't think anybody in the West really can compete fully with that paint presence. That is, look, there's nothing you can do. You double him in the paint. He's the best passing big man in the league. He's going to find the open guy. You know what I mean? And if you don't double him in the paint, he's got great post moves. He's gonna be able to get around you. They run the whole offense through him. And they're very talented. They got a great core of players around him too. So I think it's gonna be tough to beat the Nuggets, honestly. But yeah, I think it scares them a little bit, right? If they meet in the series, look, if you're gonna get a 1-8 matchup with some intrigue, that's gonna be the 1-8 matchup with some intrigue in the West.
Mm-hmm. By the way, when Jokic was drafted, and of course, he's been the recent last 10, 15, a whole slew of great European players have really brought something special to the NBA. And certainly he's become one of those, one of the best. But when Jokic was drafted, were the expectations anywhere near the current reality?
The expectations were high, but they weren't. Look, was he coming in with as much hype as Victor Wembanyama? No, not at all. It wasn't that high. Was it even as much hype as Luka Doncic? No. I think they expected him to be a lottery pick. I think they expected a 10-year, type player out of him, maybe make a couple All-Star games, but I don't think anybody's expected a multi-time MVP. I don't. If you said you called that shot when he came out, I don't know. Good for you.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So the other night I was watching the end of, or it was just last night, and so Giannis had 50 points and 13 boards. And it's a question, with the Bucks, can they stay healthy? Of course, that's a question with every team. But if you look at, Philly, obviously, And I don't know. There's like a few other teams you could certainly throw in. But if Milwaukee is healthy, and so you look at what the Celtics have, is it basically flip a coin, or do you have a heavy favorite?
I like the Celtics because they're a little deeper. I think they're similarly talented with the Bucks, but they're a little deeper and they're a little less prone because they're deeper and a little younger. They're a little less prone to fall to that injury. One of the prime injuries that the Milwaukee's dealt with this year is Chris Middleton. Has been injured twice, once for a long stretch, once for a short stretch. He's back now, and I know they're happy to have him back. And they were able to get through it. They're still leading the Central at 33-17 right now. But Middleton's an older player. Holiday's an older player. A lot of their role players are advanced as far as the NBA is concerned. Whereas it seems the Celtics are able to come up with these younger role players over and over and over again. These guys like Peyton Pritchard and Jaylen, not Jaylen Brown, but he's obviously a premier player, but Marcus Smart, these role players that they seem to every 3 or 4 years hit on. You know what I mean? And Milwaukee's not really done the exact same thing. So, Boston can really run a lot more youth out there than can Milwaukee. So I would give them the edge in a 7-game series. One team, though, that I've been really impressed with down the stretch, and it pains me to say it because I don't like the makeup of their locker room. I think it's probably kind of a disaster. But the Brooklyn Nets, Kevin Durant is having arguably the best season of his career right now. I think if there were going to be a dark horse MVP vote, it would probably go to Kevin Durant. And then Kyrie Irving, as much as I think he's a bit of a head case, and I don't know how long his NBA career is going to be ultimately. Boy, I mean, is there any point guard as talented as him when he's on? He's got the best ball handling in the league, in my opinion. He drives the lane as good as he's ever done it before, and as good as anybody in the league. He's got a dynamite 3-point shot. The combination of those two, now they struggle with the depth thing even more than Milwaukee does. But even said, though, they have 2 premier superstars who, when they're fully engaged, they're very, very hard to beat. And they've gone on a big winning streak as of late. They're sitting right now at 30-19. They're 3rd in the Atlantic. They could easily overtake Philly, and they could challenge by the end of the season. They could challenge Boston for that division.
All right. Speaking of Kyrie, the trouble he got himself into in terms of off the field and his comments, that were highlighted or supporting, comments or writings, whatever, that were seen as anti-Semitic. Okay, so, do you think, for whatever is that something where he sits down and the team suspended him, for 3 games or something like that?
Yeah, it was like 3 games. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So is that something where he sits down, from what with the owner, or strictly coach and GM, or even in that locker room, some seasoned veterans? How does that work internally, where you've got a great player, but he's got himself in trouble with some stuff that, would offend, obviously, fans, sponsors, the whole bit?
Yeah, I think it's probably the GM, the coach, and a PR person, something like that. And let's be honest about Kyrie Irving. This is not the first time that he's done something unfavorable to the fan base. Where us people are going to turn kind of a side eye at him. Now this is probably the worst thing, the as far as popular culture is concerned. But to the basketball fans, he's also been what I like to call kind of a locker room cancer kind of player, where it just seems like it's all about them all the time. And he decides when he wants to go to practice, when he wants to go to the games. I've got to take a mental break. Look, and my, in my own private life, I'm an HR manager. I understand needing to take time off. And NBA players, however, they're like teachers. They get a whole summer off. Like you get plenty of time off. You're one of the highest paid people for a profession in the entire world. You are a world-class athlete. Kyrie Irving is one of these guys. I think we can look back at the end of his career. We're going to and say, like, yeah, but it could have been so much more. Like, it's one of these guys, like, yeah, but it could have been so much more. Like, I look and I'm not saying he's a locker room cancer, but I look at a guy like Rasheed Wallace, and I think, like, yeah, but like he could have been so much more. You know what I mean? Like, with his post moves, his ability to shoot the 3, it seems like she just disappeared for games. Kyrie just literally disappears. Like, is it there in the stadium? it's not it's like Sheed was on the court. Like Kyrie's like not even in the stadium for long stretches. And to me, I don't think you see like those sports teams, and you know this, Norm, like they're a family, and you got to have your brother's back. And when you're not there, you don't have your brother's back. It kind of ruins things. You know, it ruins that chemistry in the locker room. And I think we've seen that play out in Brooklyn in major ways. I mean, that said, they're having a great year, and certainly a great run over the last month or two.
So, by the way, just one more point on Kyrie. So, for the time, I can't remember, was it 1 or 2 years he was at Duke before he came out?
1 year.
1 year, okay. So, even in the 1 year is pretty short, and it goes fast in college. Do you think Coach K had issues, and it was just, okay, he dealt with them as he would, a great leader, great man, great everything, right? But do you think maybe similar things to a smaller scale went on at Duke, but Coach K managed to keep it in-house and deal with it one-on-one?
Well, if you remember, I think he was injured for most of that season, like 80% of the season. I mean, I think he only played like a couple weeks, and then he got injured, and then he remained the number one prospect even through that season-ending injury is basically what happened. So I don't know that Coach K even had enough time with him to experience those problems. He had time off for most of his Duke career. And so I don't think we didn't really get to see much of Kyrie Irving at Duke. So ultimately, I think Coach K would have had an influence. But then you could look at guys like Grayson Allen, who, is one of the more hated guys in the NBA, and was certainly one of the more hated guys in college basketball. I don't know. But then again, like sometimes it's tough because Grayson Allen to me isn't that same kind of all about me locker room cancer. He's just a real good trash talker and a real good teammate. I think it's a little bit different. I don't know. It seems like a veteran coach like Coach K could have been able to rein it in. Unfortunately, once he got to the NBA, he entered the era where the players run the show, and that's the era they're in right now. And so, then this is the result. It would have been, I tell you what, it would have been really interesting to see him play, let's say, like in the 90s. When you had those stronger personalities as coaches, and you had the stricter rules, you didn't have the same free agency type fluidity where they're able to team up and recruit each other and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, I think back now in terms of teammates, and you're going to get people from all walks of life, and that get to where they are because of their athleticism, right, and a lot of things. But so my good friend from Syracuse, Leo Routens, who was playing for the Orange when I was there, and he went on to be a first-round pick of the then champion Philadelphia 76ers in '83. So I remember Leo telling me, because he drafted into a championship caliber squad before Leo ran into a whole bunch of injuries early in his career. But anyway, I remember Leo telling me, it's kind of a funny one-liner, but I'm sure for you it adds up 100%. He says, well, sometimes to win a championship, you might have, or you have to have guys on your team. The way he put it was funny. You wouldn't want them dating your daughter.
Exactly. Yep. And that's like Grayson Allen. He's not a guy you want dating your daughter, but man, he's a good teammate to have. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. So just a fantasy league, got a couple minutes and we'll wrap it up type question. So, talking about fantasy league draft, guys, you'd say, okay, you're going into playoffs or postseason. If you were picking between Giannis and Joel Embiid right now where they're at, who do you think is the guy you want for the playoffs? And, Embiid's built like, NFL lineman, and he can score. And, of course, Giannis is he's also, he's got that athleticism and size. Would you pick one over the other?
Yeah, I would take Giannis in a fantasy draft. His ability to really fill the stat sheet is a little higher than Embiid's. Embiid can score a lot of points. He can grab a lot of rebounds, but Giannis has a way of really taking over a game when he needs to. He can score in that 40 to 50 point realm when he needs to. He could be that 13 to 20 rebound in a night kind of guy, and he can also pass the ball pretty. I think he's an underrated passer. He really can get to that 6, 7, 8, 9 assist mark. He doesn't hit a lot of triple doubles, but he gets pretty close. He's a decent passer, and he ends up playing a lot of that point forward position where he's bringing the ball down the floor, and I think that lends itself to more assists. So in a fantasy setting, I'd go with Giannis. In a real world setting, I'd go in a matchup setting. I'm going with Giannis too.
Okay, one last question. If we've got a trio of teams out of the East in terms of Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia. Is Philadelphia still, at least playoff-wise, in terms of their possibilities, are they still, from your perspective, a bit behind or a lot behind? Let's say the Celtics first and then Milwaukee second.
Yes, I think they're behind. I think they're behind both. I actually think they're behind Brooklyn and in the moment of the playoffs. Because I just look at the superstars. To me, Harden and Irving, as long as Irving's healthy and stays there, or sorry, Durant and Irving versus Harden and Embiid. And I know there's other players, there's other role players, but really it comes down to think of those four guys. I'll take Durant and Irving over Harden and Embiid, because to me, Harden is just so inconsistent. It seems to me like he's also taught Embiid how to fill the stat sheet by getting to the line, and I abhor that style of play. I really do, and I don't think that it works kind of at that championship contention level. Where they drive the lane and they like loop that arm under the defender's arm, and then they go up and take the shot, and it's automatically shots at the line. I've seen Embiid do it now that he's played with Harden. It's almost like he's taught him the same thing. and if you look at Embiid's points, if you really break down the splits, he's shot more free throws this year than any year in his career, and a lot of his points actually come from the free throw line. And I don't like that style of play. I don't think it holds up ultimately in the playoffs against those premier teams as much as it does in the regular season against teams like Toronto or Indiana or Detroit, teams like that.
All right, so one last question, we'll wrap it up. So if Denver is the Western finalist, and it is against, let's say, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Celtics, Philly, even though it's a long shot. So let's say if Boston's the creme de la creme, is a great team for sure. But whoever it is from the East, Denver against any of them, do you still pick Denver against any Eastern representative?
I pick Denver against everyone except the Celtics.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the Celtics can get there because I think they have the makeup to do it, and Tatum has become that guy. He's become that premier player. He's entered that top 4 or 5 kind of player in the NBA realm, to me, and I think because of that, he's the closer, and they have more depth than the Nuggets, and so I'll take the Nuggets over Brooklyn. I'll take them over Philly. I'll take them over Milwaukee, but I won't take them over Boston.
Okay, I'll throw in one dumb question. Does Boston's culture, the Celtics' history and culture, it's a great culture, it's a great history, great players, and showing up in the postseason, does that have any influence or impact on the Celtics, not the other, on the Celtics when they begin to play in the postseason?
Like I on the fan base, yes, but on the players, no. The players are so young that I don't think they remember that with the success that they remember. That, and I think they're aware of Red Auerbach and Bill Russell. Obviously, I mean, yeah. They are. But I think what they feel as far as the history, as far as like the championship history, is the Kevin Garnett, Rajon Rondo, Paul Pierce, team. I think that's the team they feel that with that history. So the players I don't feel as much pressure because that was a relatively short run. I don't think they feel quite as much pressure on that front as like, but the media though, the local media does. I mean, I listen to Boston Sports Talk Radio. That there's an expectation that they will be in that conversation come May, June. You know what I mean? Late in the playoffs. There's absolutely is. And in the stadium too, you can feel it that the fans are hungry for a real contender and a real competitor. The disappointment when they lose, and it's the NBA. Look, you play that many games, you're going to lose some. And Boston's 36-15 right now. That's not too bad. That's it's a palpable disappointment. It's a big letdown even when they lose a game. So that tells me that the fan base is remembers the Red Auerbach stuff. The fan base remembers the Kevin Garnett stuff, and look, Boston fans are spoiled. I mean, it's not just basketball. It's not just basketball. They're like that. They are like that with every single sport. The Patriots this year were a major disappointment for Boston fans. At the Bruins, every loss they have, you hear about it on the radio. Hey, the Bruins and the Maple Leafs got a big one coming up.
Yeah, well, and obviously the Bruins have the Maple Leafs number when it comes to postseason going back to 2013. And, you kind of wonder if the Leafs are, if and when they're going to turn that corner, regardless of who the opponent is. Boston's just one of them. And, Austin Matthews, the Leafs can try and sign him up without any competition this summer. But if he plays the field, oh, boy, the contract he's going to be getting, he could buy his own NHL franchise, never mind play in the league and be the best player in the league. That's going to be something to see. Alex, you're always a great guest. Wonderful listening to you for sure. And again, of course, for people watching who just tuned in late, Billy George at Sack is a little bit under the weather. Look forward to having him back. And Alex, splendid job. I love listening to your encyclopedic type knowledge of any sport and every sport. So thanks for helping us out as you've always done before. We'll look forward to having you on again. And Billy, get well. I look forward to screaming at you, you screaming at me, and a nice kind of like it's kind of like a hockey fight verbally, that kind of a thing.
Yeah,
but we give a high five at the end of the match, and okay, let's go for a beer. We don't go for a beer. We go for a virtual beer. Anyways. Yeah. So thanks to our great sponsors, of course, COSA, Standardbred Horse Racing Association of Ontario, and Nikki, the King of Carpets, our producer, Jordan LaRoche, and a special guest again tonight, spectacular work, Alex Campbell. Thank you so much, Alex. We'll look forward to having you back on soon. For folks watching, wherever you've been watching live or on replay, we love you. We appreciate you checking in on the show. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll do it again next week. Have a good night, a good week. God bless. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Norm.